I think one of the key elements of the actual crux of the conversation is about fundamentally most people are concerned with what the broad centre has to say, because it's the broad centre. So what would be the EPP in the European Parliament, and the equivalent of the EPP in European governments, that actually makes the bulk of the decisions. Everything in the periphery is important only to the extent that it is able to impact where the center of power lies, and whether it leans to the right or whether it leans to the left. And one of the most radicalizing factors, and one of the things that the pro-Palestinian Broad Coalition has done best, is that it has been one of the only movements in recent memory that has been able to maintain sustained street pressure for 2 years. I cannot think of another organization or organized activist movement that has been able to bring out the sort of numbers that pro-Palestinian demonstrations have been able to do week after week, Saturday after Saturday, in London, in Madrid, in Barcelona, in Berlin, etc., etc., etc. Every single major city. And that street pressure, which makes it appear that their movement is much stronger than it is. You know, at the end of the day, we're talking about, at the most in the UK, a few million people, and say, you know, a few tens of thousands of those being committed activists who go out every Saturday. It's fundamentally the same people going out, but they're doing it repeatedly, giving the impression that they are far stronger than they are. And that ends up shifting the centre, because the centre fears, hey, you're a centrist politician. You're afraid that if you vote one way, you're going to have a picket outside your MP office. And then you see the other obviously radicalizing factor has been, and I think this is a very important element. Maya mentioned that she doesn't fully believe in the Islamization of Europe. It's going to take a very, very long time. It's certainly happening. The demographics are shifting. The United Kingdom will be minority white British by 2063, according to fairly conservative estimate. It doesn't mean it'll be majority Muslim by 2063, but it'll be minority white British by 2063. Now, the other thing that's very radicalizing is, if you are a centrist member of parliament, and next thing you know, sitting in the House of Commons, you're a classical Tory, or you're a sort of working class Labourite MP, and the next thing you see the Member of Parliament for Bradford, the Honourable Adnan Hussain, banging on about Gaza from the Houses of Commons. And you realise that there's 4 of these Gaza independents. 4 members of the British Houses of Commons have been elected on a ticket that includes Gaza and Gaza alone. They campaigned on nothing else. So if you are a centrist and you look at that, that is in and of itself radicalizing. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that you see, because fundamentally, when you are one of these centrist politicians, you move around polite society. Your only real contact with the real world is ironically online, where the playing field has been so manipulated. And I think it's worth going back to this, because I actually think that is one of the most important elements of this debate that is influencing the centre and pushing them to make decisions that aren't necessarily reflective of the majority of the voter base that actually votes fundamentally for centrist parties. Is you go online and you post something mildly centrist about Gaza, or about Israel, or about the Israel-Hamas conflict, or about the 12-day Iran war. And next thing you know, your post has been overtaken by radicals on only one side. And you sort of, even though you know you've been told that it's a psyop, it's very difficult.
In this point, before, Israelis would think that, okay, this is what you just described is the Western Europe phenomena. But we can rely on the veto of the Central Eastern Europe. I'm not sure it's there anymore.
No, not necessarily so. And this goes back to partially the fact that, and this is why I'm bringing up the sustained street pressure, and I'm bringing up the psyops, because they have eventually shifted public opinion, including, for example, the cease in several weeks of ceasing humanitarian aid to Gaza was perhaps not radicalizing, but certainly shifted certain people away. Just to conclude on the point of the psyops, they have been incredibly successful in the sense that they have convinced people that there are far more people supportive of, and the amount of foreign interference, both people from the broader third world who've become increasingly online, increasingly speak English, and are increasingly numerous, because as a percentage of all the population, Europeans are now significantly less than they were 100 years ago. the impact of foreign citizens impacting our politics, it cannot be understated, and the impact of organized psyop groups. And I go back to not just the Russians, but the incredibly effective and brutally executed operations led by the Qataris and the CCP and Iran have been seriously effective at shifting policy in Europe. I really think it cannot be understated how efficient and how effective they've been.